Call a meeting of May the 16th, 2022 to order and ask for the roll call. Here.
Commissioner McLaughlin.
Here.
Commissioner Smith.
Present.
Commissioner McCauley.
Here.
Commissioner Wright. Absent.
Okay,
Mr. Chairman, quorum is present.
We have the quorum here. Let's begin with consent agenda. Consent agenda items are considered to be routine and are acted on with one motion. There will be no separate discussion on these items unless the mayor, a council member of city staff, or a citizen requests an item to be removed from the consent agenda for discussion. Items removed from the consent agenda will be placed on the regular agenda in a sequence determined by the city council or planning and zoning. Any item on the consent agenda which contains written conditions of approval from the City Eagle staff, Planning and Zoning Commission, or Design Review Board will be adopted as part of the City Council consent agenda to approve motions unless specifically stated otherwise. And we have only one item, the minutes of May 2nd, 2022 for consideration.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we accept the consent agenda as presented.
Thank you, Commissioner McLaughlin. Do you hear a second?
Second.
Seconded by Commissioner McCauley. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay. Consent agenda is adopted. Next, unfinished business, of which we have none. Next item is public hearing. All public hearings before the Eagle Planning and Zoning Commission will take both in-person and remote public testimony via WebEx. Meeting login instructions are posted for those who may want to use their internet. If you just want to watch the meeting without giving testimony on the internet, I don't know if they can hear us or see us or whatever, please watch the live stream. Public hearings are legally noticed hearings required by state law. The public may provide formal testimony regarding the application or issue before the City Council or the P&Z. This testimony will become part of the record, hearing record for that application or matter. Public testimony has a limit time of up to 3 minutes, and once all those who have testified testify, we will continue to allow additional testimony if time allows. Disclosure of ex parte and or conflicts of interest need to take place. And our first item is item A12 or A12-21 RZ 1821 and PP 19-21 Farmstead Landing Subdivision, WH Eagle 80 LLC. And Mr. Jorgensen, I believe, is here to do the presentation. You had a question or had a comment?
Yes, good evening, Commissioners. Morgan Besaw, member of the planning staff. Before I handed it over to the applicant, I just wanted to briefly explain why this is on the agenda in front of you again this evening. If you remember, we saw this application was presented to you on April 18th. Following the public hearing, it was determined that the noticing was insufficient for the public hearing. It was 500 feet instead of the code required 1,500 feet. And so it was renoticed, and it is back again before you this evening. Just wanted to clarify that if you have questions.
Questions?
Yes. Morgan, so we will need to make a whole new motion.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Jorgensen.
Good evening, Commissioners. For the record, Dave Jorgensen, address 14254 West Battenberg Drive, Boise. And yes, we are back in front of you tonight. Sorry to take up an additional amount of your time. We respect your time and acknowledge the error in the posting. I won't say who, but just acknowledge it and apologize for that. With that in mind, I did want to, and I think it's appropriate for the record to go through the presentation again, so it's a complete record, and happy to answer any questions if there are any as we go through the process. This is the same PowerPoint presentation that I gave in the prior hearing. with the noted change of check marks. Check marks means that's something I added new. And so why are we here again? Morgan's staff for the City of Eagle explained why, so I won't go any further into that. So I'll introduce the site. We'll talk about the application details, issues or concerns, and the staff report and development agreement and/or conditions of approval. With regard to the site, I'll introduce that now. It's located on the north side of Floating Feather, just over 80 acres in size, and it's between Linder Road and Park Lane. It's in the City of Eagle's area of impact, and it's infill, surrounded by development, annexed on the north and west, and other sites surrounding. Its comprehensive plan for this area is neighborhood residential transition. I'll explain that here in a minute. And there are 3 access points for the development. The 2 main entrances are Park Lane and Floating Feather, and North Stubb Street called North Livorno. So the applications are annexation zoning with the development agreement and preliminary plat. The annexation zoning and development agreement, first of all, we are requesting an R2 zone with a development agreement. The development agreement has purpose to ensure that whatever conditions of approval are imposed upon this development are followed through. It's a contract with the city, and we agree to those constraints to ensure it's built as approved. There's justifications in the staff report and our narrative with regard to why this is justified zoning, but let me point specifically to the future land use map. You can see this arrow points to the property. This site is located or designated as neighborhood residential, which is 2 to 4 dwelling units per acre, but it has a transition overlay to have a little less than 2 units per acre. So with that in mind, we comply with the city's comprehensive plan and future land use map because we are just a little less than 2 units per acre. The R2 residential zone is an allowed zone in the area. We're requesting less density than the maximum allowed, and this compatible density is adjacent to the properties to the north to meet the transitioning requirements as stated before of less than 2 dwelling units per acre. Now, moving on to the preliminary plat, there are 140 total residential units, or 1.74 dwelling units per acre, which is less than 2 dwelling units per acre in the comp plan for the transition area. They're all single-family detached homes. We'll talk about those here in a minute. And it's planned to be developed in 3 phases. We'll start in the southwest corner where the utilities are and move to the north and east from there. It's a well-thought-out design of connecting the streets, which is required. I'll get into that in a minute here to the north. But we have a circuitous route, so it's not a high-speed traffic just jamming up to the north, but we have to kind of meander to get up to there to slow down traffic. We're clustering the units with smaller lots with an offsetting amount of open space. There's substantial open space to this development and many quality amenities. And let's talk about those. First of all, there's over 22 acres of open space, which is approximately or just a little less than 30% of the site. There's a swimming pool, there's a tot lot, pickleball courts, 2 lakes for both active and passive uses, park and picnic areas, barbecue and gazebo gathering areas, and also pedestrian-friendly separated sidewalks and street trees and pathways, which is quite a bit of amenity for a site of this size, or only 140 units. The water for the site is actually, there's excess water. There's a well site that'll be used to help supplement as needed these ponds, so they'll be full year-round, but it's a supplemental water right, which is what we'll be using. We'll use the primary water right, which is the intended purpose to always use surface water rights first. This is a little more closer look to the site. As I mentioned, the amenities, you drive into the main entrance off Floating Feather. Off to the right is the community pool. Off to the left is the tot lots and pickleball courts. There's pathways throughout. Up in the northwest area, there's one of our 2 ponds, but we're using that as a kind of a nice little serene walkway where you have almost like a land bridge walking between 2 ponds, which is kind of a neat little feature. Looking forward to seeing that built out that way. And then to the eastern side is another large pond with estate-style lots backing up to them. Sample homes. These are new elevations, new plans we've made. I see a question. I'll pause.
Excuse me one moment, Mr. Chair.
Sure.
Mr. Smith?
Sir, may I ask just a quick question? On that walkway across the lake, is it a solid construction, or does it have water flowing between the 2 sides of the lake?
Mr. Chair and Commissioner Smith, it will function and look like a full lake, but the reality is there might be a pipe in between to let the water flow through, so it helps with the movement of water, not stagnant water, but it won't be a floating bridge. It'll have a lot of earth and berm underneath most of it.
Thank you.
Sure. As I mentioned, these are new elevations, new floor plans that are being presented to the community. Single-family detached homes, a lot of variety in the home sizes and elevations, and single stories and 2 stories and RV garages. Quality homes with nice amenities and quality architecture for the community. So we had a neighborhood meeting, and I want to touch on that just briefly. We had that a while back and prior to application submittal, and there's a lot of good feedback, some discussions of support, opposition, and a lot of neutral feedback. We listened to their comments, made adjustments where we could, and many really liked the overall design of the subdivision, the amenities, the open space, the pathways, the proposed modern farmhouse design for the homes. Always there's some questions or concerns that are raised at these neighborhood meetings, specifically questions or concerns around traffic, transition to the north, homes, amenities, and fencing type and location. I've already addressed homes and amenities, but let me touch on the others here in this traffic. So the main access to the development is Floating Feather and Park Lane. We requested access off of Linda Road, but ACHD denied that due to the proximity to the future roundabout at Floating Feather and Linder, and the high volume traffic that'll be running up and down Linder. There's spacing requirements for safety, and by the time we push it all the way up further to the north, then maybe there's a conflict to the Bellaterra access further to the north, and so they asked that we not have an access on Linder for those reasons. The access to the north is required because of it's a stub road from Bellaterra. We're not creating that. We're just tying into an existing connection, and it creates what they call neighborhood connectivity. If neighbors want to visit neighbors, they don't have to drive all the way out to Linder to go see their neighbor, but rather they can just see their neighbors that way. The traffic impact study was done. It was fairly recent with recent or updated traffic counts. Note the check mark in the presentation here. We mentioned it in the presentation, but I didn't type it in, so I'm going to say it here for the record. We had one neighbor to the south of us who did call me. I was not able to be at the meeting, but he did call me, and he asked about our access location on Floating Feather, and specifically wanted to know if we could move it. It aligns with their road, or his road, he says, where they have homes, and we looked at that, and ACHD and us agreed that it's actually safer to align roads, not offset roads, especially the further you offset it to the west, it'd be too close to the Linder roundabout. So we did not move it. We think that's the right location for it. Plus, it centers it within our development. So sometimes people ask the question about mitigation. Well, we're paying impact fees to help enable ACHD's capital improvement plan or future widening of the roads. We are also doing some widening along our frontage of Linder Road and Floating Feather and Park Lane per the ACHD staff report. We're adding a sidewalk on Park Lane. We're adding a 10-foot wide multi-use pathway on Linder and on Floating Feather to help with the safer routes for bikes and pedestrians. We also reduced the density. We're not doing the further max, which also offers for further mitigation for traffic. With all that, we agreed 100% with the ACHD staff report and their conditions of approval. Transition to existing neighborhoods. There's some discussion about that, if you may recall from our last meeting. What we're doing and what we are planning to do is we're clustering the homes with increasing open space in the development. Specifically, though, we have the same number of lots to the adjacent development to the north, specifically the western side, the more than western half, where we're aligning or pretty close to aligning lot lines to lot lines. Some you can't because of pie-shaped nature on the ends, but same number of lots to backing up to each other. The larger lots adjacent on the northeast corner, we have larger lots against them as well. There's a discussion, this is where the discussion took place, regarding a common area pathway on the north border. And there are mixed opinions to that. Some neighbors want it, some are very opposed to that. The reasons for opposition include concerns for safety. They don't want added pedestrians or noisy dogs disturbing them in their backyards. So what we agreed to do, and we still agree to do, is to add trees and shrubs in our backyards to enhance landscape buffering back there, but no common lot, as we don't think that's appropriate. Be a safety concern, and not all the neighbors agree to it. Fencing, again, there's some discussion on that. Solid fencing is what our proposed is on our buffer berms, where on the east, south, and western border on the back of the berms will be solid fencing. Along the common lots within the development will be open style fencing, wrought iron style. And then on our north border, again, clarification, I put a check mark here to make sure it's all really clear. If there's an existing fence on the north border, we are not putting a fence against an existing fence. If there's not a fence, then we will have an open style fence. And most of those will be an open wrought iron on the western side where those exist. And so it'll end up being a continuous wrought iron fence along that rope on that north border, except for on the northeast side where they have the open rail fence, and that'll be a continuation of rail fence out to Park Lane. In our development agreement, we request for three things: setbacks for homes, private streets for 2 small cul-de-sacs, and the easement reduction around the ponds. Regarding the development agreement for setbacks, we requested these previously. There's not a lot of deviation, but there's a little slight deviation. And so we asked for these, and I'll just state them for the record: 30 foot from front property line. But if it's a garage, we want to make sure that we have adequate parking on the back of sidewalk to the front of the garage. And so it's a 20-foot setback from back of sidewalk to front of garage. The rear is 25 feet, 7.5 for single level, plus 5 feet for two-story. 20 feet from the property line for a street corner side, then lot coverage being 50%. Private streets, that technically is allowed in the code. We want to be very clear about that in what we're requesting and ask for that. There are two small cul-de-sacs. I can reference those if you'd like. They're in the northeast part of the development, where one cul-de-sac has 5 homes, another one has 6. We ask for those to be private streets. And lastly, the easement around the ponds. They're not needed for irrigation storage per se, and there's good access from multiple points to the ponds. So we're requesting a reduction to a 12-foot easement, not a 30-foot easement, because the maintenance can be achieved with that. With all that, as we discussed at the Planning and Zoning Commission meeting, it was a little over a month, or about a month ago, the Planning and Zoning Commission here did recommend approval with all of the things we asked for, with the reduced, or the setbacks as stated, the private streets for the 2 small cul-de-sacs, the easement reduction around the ponds, and then you added a 4th item, and that was install additional trees and shrub landscaping in the backyards along the north border to provide screening and buffering. That concludes my presentation to you tonight. We're very excited to bring this development to you. This will be a quality development, a nice addition to the city with some nice homes with new modern farm style development, homes with a lot of amenities to the community. We agree with the staff report and the condition of approval with the 4 items as requested, and request your approval tonight. Stand for any questions.
Any questions?
One quick one, Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Smith.
Absolutely has nothing to do with the development per se, but that property is planted. I'm wondering when you start building, before that crop is due, or does that crop go under?
Mr. Chairman and Commissioner Smith, I'll get an answer for you, but I think I know the answer, but I'll verify it when I come back for the rebuttal section. But knowing how long it takes to get engineering plans finalized and then through the approval process, I'm guessing as soon as the crop comes off, we will not be disturbing the crop this season. It'll be after that season before we'd even be able to start at the earliest for the development. I'll verify that for you and come back if I'm wrong.
It's just a curiosity question. Thank you for indulging me.
Sure.
Other questions?
No.
Okay, Morgan?
Thank you.
Okay, good evening again. Morgan Besaw. As I mentioned, this application was originally presented to you, but we will be presenting the whole thing again. The applicant's requesting annexation and rezone from RUT, Rural Urban Transition, to R2DA, Residential with a Development Agreement in lieu of a PUD, and preliminary plat approvals for Farmstead Landing, which will be a 169-lot subdivision with 140 buildable lots and 29 common lots, all residential. Here's the vicinity map. The project stretches from Linder Road to Park Lane, just north of Floating Feather. It is 80 acres. I went through those numbers. I'm just going to go through each page of the plat. The green area is common area. They have a lot of amenities. There's pickleball. There's going to be a pool area, walking paths, 2 ponds. There's no change proposed to the comp plan designation, which is neighborhood residential. The surrounding areas are all single-family residential as well. Here's a clip from the comprehensive plan designation, which is neighborhood residential with a transition overlay. The zoning that they are, well, the density that they're proposing is 1.74 dwelling units per acre. The minimum lot size in the R2 zone would typically be 17,000 square feet. The applicant's proposing a minimum lot size of 10,000 square feet. They can reduce their lot size through the PUD or DA in lieu of a PUD process. Minimum lot width in the R2 zone is 75 feet. They are not proposing anything smaller than 75 feet. Minimum street frontage is 35 feet. They are proposing 40 feet, so they are in excess of the minimum street frontage. Total acreage of common area open space. Per code, it would be 16 acres required. They're at over 22 acres. Percent of common area as active open space. Code would require 15%, but because of all those amenities we discussed, pickleball, swimming, pathways, they're at 60%. So they're well in excess for their active area open space as well. This is just a zoning compatibility table showing that the R2 zone is compliant with neighborhood residential. The Eagle Comprehensive Plan land use designates this property as neighborhood residential, which I mentioned before, which forecasts a density of 2 to 4 units per acre. The proposed subdivision has an overall density of 1.74 units per acre, so it's well within that or a little bit below. Lots along the northern boundary align with the lot layout of the adjacent residential subdivision. You can see right here they're pretty much spot on with how they match up to the residential subdivision to the north. As I mentioned a second ago, the applicants were requesting a few modifications to design standards as part of their DA in lieu of a PUD. As I said, code does require that you can have a reduced lot size provided that you have an offsetting increase in open space. The applicant has met and exceeded the required offsetting increase in open space to justify those smaller lots. They're also requesting some modification to setbacks. The front living area setback will continue to be 30 feet per code. Front setbacks to garage doors will be 25 feet from back of sidewalk or to garage door elevation to allow parking of vehicles on the driveway without crossing over the sidewalk. The first request for alleviation would be to the rear. They're proposing a 25-foot rear setback where code for R2 would require 30. Interior side, they're requesting 7.5 feet for the first story and 5 additional feet for each second story or each additional story. The 5 feet for each additional story is per code, but the code would say in the R2 zone a 10-foot interior side setback, so it's a 2.5-foot difference or reduction. Street side setbacks of 20 feet is remaining unchanged. It's just the ones that I highlighted in orange, as well as maximum lot coverage. Maximum lot coverage would be 40% in the R2 zone, and they're proposing an increase to 50%. Let's see. The easement around the 2 ponds, they're requesting an easement reduction to 12 feet. It's not in the code, but it is in the city's pressurized irrigation standards that you have a minimum 30-foot perimeter easement from the top of bank to allow for maintenance of all storage ponds used for irrigation. The applicant's requesting to reduce that from 30 feet to 12 feet. The ponds are not needed for irrigation storage per se. They are an amenity, but instead of irrigation, water will flow through them. The irrigation standard, the intent of the 30-foot setback is to allow for access for maintenance in and around the ponds. These ponds, because they are amenity and they're open, they have many access points to each of them. So that's part of the justification for their reduction of the easement. So code does allow for private streets, and as no more than 10% of the lots should be accessed from private street. They are proposing only these lots in yellow to be accessed from their private gated streets, which is less than 10%. It would be 11 lots. The rest of these streets would remain public. They have access down to Floating Feather and to Park. The green is common area. The pink is active common area. So these are the trails, the parks, the gazebos, pickleball, pool. The subdivision includes pedestrian sidewalks that create pathways through the subdivision, as well as 10-foot separated paved pathways along Linder and Floating Feather. The site was reviewed by the Parks, Pathways, Recreation Commission in February, where they made the recommendation for approval. This image shows their fence layout. As you can see that from the beginning, it was never intended by the applicant to put, additional fencing up against the fencing to the north. They do have perimeter fencing and then open style or privacy fencing on some lots, which is, I believe this image is hard to see, but the privacy fences would be behind the berms, and then common open style fencing would be on common lots and corners. There is one condition that's already listed in the site-specific conditions. That's that the applicant should be required to submit a revised landscape plan showing either an increase in the height of the berm to 10 feet along Linder Road or the inclusion of a 3-foot tall decorative block wall on top of the berm to meet the 10-foot, and the applicant has said that they do not have an issue with that. And that's just to make sure that the buffering requirement is adequate there along Linder because it is an arterial. Here are some sample renderings. You have all of the draft conditions. Those did not change from last time. Let's stand for questions.
Any questions?
Mr. Chair.
Commissioner
Morgan,
McLaughlin.
so when we make the motion after we have the hearing, whatever we decide, we need to add any specific site conditions of approval to whatever motion is made.
Any conditions that you want to add, you would have to add. So anything that you suggested last time would not be included at this point.
Thank you.
Some of the ones that were discussed last time were specifying the setbacks and the lot coverage and the easement of around the pond in the DA. If you approve of the request for alleviation, we want to specify those in the DA. That was one condition that you guys added last time. There was also a condition about if fencing is placed on the northern boundary, that it be open style, which the applicant has already stated as part of their proposal.
Thank you.
Other questions? Okay. At this point, we will open the meeting for public input for the open public testimony, public hearing testimony, and let's see if we've got people signed up that want to testify. Okay. Okay. Laura Swanson, if you'd please give us your name and address.
Good evening, Laura Swanson, 1000 Park Lane. And I have two different concerns, and I am not for the subdivision, but basically for two different reasons. One, the traffic, and I know we've talked about the traffic study and everything, but the traffic study was done north of Floating Feather rather than south of Floating Feather, which is where I live. And so the traffic that they've been talking about will go from Park Lane, Floating Feather, either onto Floating Feather or up Park Lane. So there's going to be there'll be a lot more traffic south than there is north. And right now, we have so much traffic on the road, it's hard to get out of. People are going way too fast. Finally did get the speed limit signs in, the flashing ones, but still doesn't matter. And the streets just aren't designed. I mean, many people actually have their driveways, their mailboxes, there's kids on the road, there's families with pets on the road. They're not designed to have another 1,000 cars a day on there. It just really isn't effective for our area. And the other concern I have is the well to be used for supplemental water use, irrigation, recreation. We're on drinking water. My well is my drinking water. So are my neighbors are on drinking water. If they pull that much water out there, I have no idea what it's going to do to my well and whether it's still going to be effective, we're going to be able to use it or not. And it's only for irrigation and supplemental use so they can paddleboard. That concerns me a whole lot. I'm just asking you to consider these factors. I know traffic's been studied and everything, but it really is beginning to negatively impact us in those in the area who have been here for many years. And I'm very concerned about just using irrigation and recreation to impact people's lives. So thank you.
Okay, thank you. Do we have any questions?
Thank you, Ms. Swanson.
Okay, I have a question for you. How far north of Park Lane is 1000 Park Lane? I mean,
So I border the high school. So I look at the baseball field.
okay, great.
So I'm
Thank you.
right there.
I thought that's kind of where your area was that you lived.
Yeah, so we're really close to where people are coming.
Okay, thank you. Next, we have Kurt Barber. Oh, it's for the next one, okay. Jared, same thing. Ron Stone, same one, okay. All right, well, that's all we've got signed up for. Well, I come up here and tell me because I need to have this on the record.
Thank you. Sorry,
Thank you.
one more question. Laura Swanson, 1000 Park Lane. I did go to the neighborhood meeting, and I did bring up the well as a concern. But apparently it didn't make the list for some reason. So I don't know whether it was addressed, not addressed, but it wasn't listed as a concern, and it was for me and my neighbors who did attend.
Okay, I'll bet we can get an answer to that for you.
Okay?
Ma'am, Mr. Chair, if I may,
Yes.
quick question. I'm asking this question so that it will be addressed in the rebuttal, and that is that last time we had this discussion, there was a lot of time spent, or a lot of the report was spent on talking about the water, the shares, et cetera, et cetera. And it seemed to me that I was surprised. Our 3 minutes is up. Huh?
Go ahead.
I was surprised it wasn't mentioned this time, but perhaps in rebuttal we might hear something about that water study and also answer your questions.
Okay, great, thank you, because I didn't get notice the previous time to be able to attend, so thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Okay, anyone else like to testify? I don't have anybody else on my list. Just raise your hand. Okay, yes, sir. Name and address, please.
My name is Denver Lowe, and I'm at 1830 North Raising Water Place
In Eagle?
in Eagle.
Okay.
Would it be possible to get a hard copy? I was an aviator in the Marine Corps, and I have very good vision, but some of that stuff I don't think I mean, the young lady that was presenting, she couldn't see it. It was on her screen. Is there any way to get a hard copy so we can actually know what's being said?
Mr. Chairman, the public that needs to request a public records request for that information, or it's also available online on our website.
Is it printable? Can you print it out?
It is printable, yes.
The regular website?
Correct, yes.
Go ahead.
Okay, thank you, sir. Okay, Mr. Jorgensen?
For the record, Dave Jorgensen, 14254 West Battenberg Drive, Boise. I appreciate the comments were given. I saw three things that were stated. First of all, address traffic. Next was supplemental water, and then neighbor meeting. Maybe that's the same thing with water. So with regard to traffic, there's a very thorough process to go through to discuss traffic. I'm not sure what the neighbor was looking at with regard to Park Lane not being studied. That would not be a correct statement. Park Lane was studied. We don't get to choose what roads to study. We don't get to choose what intersections to study. The way the process is we go to the traffic experts, Compass and ACHD, and they define the scope of the study for the traffic impact study. Then a traffic impact study is performed based on their guidance and their direction by a third-party consultant, and then it's submitted to ACHD for review. And so all that has been studied, and so I'm not sure what was looked at there, but having said that, Park Lane was looked at, and ACHD provided the required conditions of approval for what we have. I do know also that Linder and Park Lane are in the 5 and 20-year plan for future widenings or for future improvements, and that's why we're paying impact fees, as I also mentioned previously in my testimony. Secondly, is supplemental water for the ponds. Sorry if there's some confusion about addressing or not addressing the water for the ponds. It was not the top issue, but I'll address it now. Clearly, traffic and what homes and the neighborhood transition were the highest points of discussion at the neighborhood meeting. Having said that, with regard to water rights, this is a unique site. There's 2 water rights for this property. Most properties don't have that. This has surface water rights and subsurface or a well right. The way I see it, in fact, the farm depends upon the crop. Sometimes corn or other uses actually require a little more water that are available than what are available to the property for irrigation, which is why the prior landowner acquired those additional water rights. That is not necessary now because we're going into a development production where you have streets, where you have yards, and a lot less. So actually, the way I see it and the way it's been explained to me by the water experts is that we will be drawing down the groundwater less with this development, not more, even with the ponds. Again, the water will be used to discuss the evaporation. It's called evapotranspiration. The water right will be necessary to compensate for the evaporation of the water in the ponds. That will be approved and reviewed and approved by the Department of Water Resources. And so we've already done that analysis, and we have no concerns have been identified by the experts. So with that in mind, I think I've addressed the comments. You may have more comments or questions for us today. But again, we're asking for approval. I'll bump up again to where we were there, or you can refer to the staff in their comments as well. But we appreciate your review and consideration of our presentation tonight. It's actually kind of interesting. One of the other neighbors that was here just before the meeting, I had a nice little discussion with them. They live in Bellaterra. It must be just a little further away than the 500-foot radius, or they were not able to attend. But either way, they showed up and had a nice conversation with them. They expressed some concerns about traffic, and so we talked about that. And they understand the process, and more importantly is that our cars won't go north to come south, but rather they may actually use our roads. They may come just straight south through our development to get to Floating Feather to State Street. And it was a nice discussion, but I'm available for them or any neighbors they want to discuss after these hearings for their further questions. But with that in mind, we appreciate your review tonight and ask for your approval with the 3 items we discussed. And I'll let you address how you wanted to address the transition on the north with regard to landscape buffer. But we again think that the 4 items that were referenced before are appropriate and address those comments from the large group of neighbors that were here last time, and stand for any questions you have.
Okay. Questions? I do. Remind me again about the parking areas for the pool and pickleball and open space and things like that.
Mr. Chairman, we looked at that. We actually wanted, and if you can follow my cursor, the cursor's there, yeah, okay. So we actually previously showed, I'm not going to try to zoom in here, but we actually had some little parking notches in here, and ACHD said not allowed. So we said, okay, whatever. So then we looked at it a little further, and there are no homes fronting this development, the pool area. Same with the tot lot pickleball. Sometimes you have homes that are backing up to it and you kind of jam a few extra houses in there, but that's not what this builder developer that I'm working with is doing. They're actually providing parking on both, well, there may be some for the homes here, but around this entire perimeter there'll be no homes fronting and additional parking. So we looked at that. We recognized some people will walk to the pool. Not everyone walks to the pool. I'll add one more comment. There's a community that I built in Meridian called Settlers Bridge. It's almost, well, it's a little more than twice this size. It's close to 300 homes. And we had a little tiny parking lot area for it, plus some parking on the collector road out in front, and a pretty good sized park behind. So it's not the same concept, but it's half the number of homes is my point. This actually, when you consider the front on parking for the adjacent to the pool area, will have more parking here than what we had over at that location. So I feel confident there's adequate parking here.
Okay. And back to the water, who will be supplying your potable water?
Mr. Chairman, that's Suez.
Okay, so it won't be coming in from a well right there on that side.
Thanks for clarifying that. And a lot of times that is raised, the question. And so Suez's water, similar to the city of Eagle, where with your wells, are in a different aquifer than a lot of the residents the surrounding. So that's a very deep aquifer. I don't know the number, but typically they're around 300 feet deep, sometimes plus or minus 50 feet, sometimes even more. And so it's a different layer where the waters are typically for the surrounding farmers that use their water for domestic use, where those wells, and I don't know theirs, but a lot of them are typically 50 to 60 feet deep. And so it's a different aquifer than what typically is used for homes.
Okay, and is that the same thing that's used for watering the lawn?
Mr. Chairman, no. Again, we have surface water rights, Dry Creek, correct? New Dry Creek is the dish company that provides the surface water rights. It's already existing water that runs through the canals that's provided to the property that the farmer uses. And
that'll be coming out of your ponds then?
Most of it will, but we can't take all of it because we have another user downstream, and so we're making sure that the downstream users have the water that they have the right to also.
Okay. Any other questions for anybody? Okay, thank you.
Again, thank you.
Any other questions for Morgan after? Okay, let's close the public hearing at this point then and open it up for comments or action by the council, or commission rather.
I'd be prepared to make a motion.
Commissioner McCauley.
I make a motion that we propose, or I would propose that we recommend for approval A 1221-RZ 1821 and PP 1921 with the 3 items already approved, which include setbacks where the home is requested, private streets for the 2 small cul-de-sacs, and easement reduction around the ponds, with the addition of the fourth, which is install additional trees and shrub landscaping in the backyard along the north border to provide screening and buffer.
Here, second?
Second.
Okay. Second from Commissioner McCauley, or McLaughlin. Morgan?
Is it all right at this point just to add something to the discussion?
Sure.
Is that okay? So the one thing that this didn't talk about was the fencing in the rear yard, which I know you added as a condition last time, so I just wanted to point that out. But two, since the time that you guys made this decision last month, staff has had some time to discuss that condition about additional landscaping in the rear yards. And I just wanted to put it out there for you guys for part of your discussion that there is currently no process through the city right now for reviewing landscape plans for individual residential properties. So we don't have a great method for tracking that, reviewing that, or enforcing that, because it won't be in the common area out front. So I just wanted to make sure that you guys were aware of that, that it would be a challenging one to enforce. So I just wanted to make sure that you had that information.
Okay. And we don't have that in the motion, I don't believe that.
I just added it. Mr. Chair?
Yeah.
With that information, I would leave it the same and allow it to the discretion of the developer, which was already going to be the case anyway. And if they choose to put a little bit more than they were going to, great. And if they don't, then we wouldn't make any difference with this motion anyway. So my motion would stand as made. And okay, let's listen to Mike.
Mr. Williams?
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner McCauley, in your motion, and Matt, I can have him repeat it, and I did this to him on his very first night, and it was a lengthy motion. I'm not going to do that. In your motion, you actually added number 4 to require the applicant to install those additional trees and shrubs and landscaping in those backyards, which then puts it upon them to go ahead and install it. And it's a shall, not a may. They've indicated that that's what they'd like to do. And to touch back on what Morgan stated, we have no review process on how we review landscaping in backyards. And in the end result, say your landscaping becomes mature, nothing prevents each one of those property owners to remove any of that landscaping because we have no way enforcing it because it's not located within a common lot. And that's why Morgan came up here and voiced that concern. But your motion did include the requirement to install in the backyards, and we don't have any process for reviewing that.
With that said, is your recommendation to just exclude number 4 then?
Correct.
Okay. Mr. Chair?
Would the term
May?
as appropriate added to the end of that sentence mean anything at all?
Doesn't seem like it.
I think it's hard to have a condition that's a may.
That'd do the same thing as may, I guess.
Mr. Chair, it's too open-ended.
Okay, so we would need to amend that motion then to drop number 4 if we were going to be in compliance with what's appropriate.
I would make a motion to amend that and just exclude number 4.
Second, agree?
Second.
Okay. We have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
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 Aye. Motion carries. Okay, next item.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, Mr. Commissioner Smith.
Mr. Victor, could you give me an opinion here? The gentleman who asked for a hard copy of this procedure, I have this one that, unlike my other one, is not marked. And rather having him kick out about 130 pages on his printer, would it be okay for me to give him this one?
Well, do you want the first initial answer that I always give everyone? It depends. So, I mean, I know it's easy that way, Commissioner Smith, but the problem is we need to treat everyone equally. And either a member of the public, if they want a hard copy from the city, they have to do a public records request for that, or they can go on the website and they can just download it. I know it's easy just to hand your packet, but that is the city's official packet, and then must be either given to the city council or shredded.
I am extremely comfortable with your answer. Because of that nagging doubt, that's why I asked for your opinion.
It's a great question.
And thank you very much. So
Thank you.
Okay, we'll continue on then with next item, CU-05-22- waiver of lot coverage, Jared Borg, and I believe Mr. Barber is going to do the presentation. Is that correct?
My name's Kurt Barber, 2437 East Chalice, Meridian, Idaho. I'm going to do the presentation along with Mr. Borg. I was just going to start it, and then he put together a nice PowerPoint.
That's fine.
That's okay. So we're here to ask to waive the lot coverage from 15% to 16.3. We want to go 1.3% over. So that is what it is. And then the second part is that I had, as we did conduct a neighborhood meeting, one couple showed up from Rush Road, which is one street over, and their concern was that was any business going to be conducted out of this building. I assured them that they had no interest in running a business out of this place. So that was the only people that showed up. And with that, Mr. Borg is here, and like I said, he put together a nice presentation.
I'll make this really easy on you. So Jared Borg, 1450 West Washam. Washam's off Ballantyne, between Floating Feather and Beacon Light. It's the best place in Eagle. Don't tell anybody. It's nice back there. And anyways, this conditional use permit, we like to build a shop. It's going to look nice. My wife got to build a really nice house, and I want to build a nice shop. So I'm an outdoor enthusiast. I want my stuff to be stored inside and not all over my property. So trailers, boats, whitewater stuff, motorcycles, snowmobiles, just really want to store it inside and have a nice, clean property. Shop's going to be built out of high-quality materials, lots of glass, and similar to this structure, minus it won't be a single slope roof. We have a nice landscape plan to buffer it all really well. Like you said, city code allows for 15%. We'd like 16.3. I'll show you real quick. This is what it looks like with a shop. I took this with my drone this morning. The gray plus the yellow is where the shop will be. Or if I can't do this, it would just be like the one on the right. Maybe just a little bit of reference. This is the same shot this morning. My neighbor next to me, Rick, great guy, good buddy. He has a shop that's the exact same size. And so it's really, there's pretty similar in scope and size to what a lot of folks do in this area. And maybe I'll just tag this last page. All these stars, maybe it's kind of hard to see because it's light, but all these stars are from like a Google map image this morning where these are larger accessory garage or shop units on properties that are close to or equal or bigger in size. Some of them are also like horse arenas. And so even though that they're for sure within their lot coverage, they're pretty large. And so I just mostly shown that just so that you get an idea that this isn't like an unusual thing in this area. Most folks on this street actually have some kind of separate shop or garage area for things like that. And I think that's all I got. You guys have any questions for me?
Questions?
Yes, I do.
Yes, Commissioner Smith.
Sure, thank you. And I'm glad you showed the yellow stars. I was curious about that as I read your request. In the packet that we received, I understand that the city planners suggested or recommended that you might go with a 60 or 70 with no conflict versus a 60 by 90 foot that would require a conditional use permit.
Yeah.
Can you tell me your reaction to it and why we are where we are today?
Yeah, so I grew up in Idaho and I love it here and I want to live here forever, and so I want it to be perfect. And so really probably my response to that is if it's going to be 60 by 70, what's going to get left out is a big RV that it's going to sit in the sun and all my neighbors are going to see, or there might be some other trailers left outside. And so really by making it bigger, I'm able to store all my junk so my neighbors don't have to look at it. There's no CC&Rs on our street. Everyone takes great care of their property and does a good job. And really for me, I feel like this is a way for me to be a good neighbor and to store all my crap inside so nobody else has to see it. And so if I make it a little bit bigger, there's enough room for all my junk. How's that sound?
Oh, it sounds very eloquent, to be quite honest with you, and I appreciate your enthusiasm.
Yeah.
And I think there's something to be said about the idea of having your valuable toys inside, undercover, safe from the solar deterioration that goes on and what have you. No, what I meant, I was just curious, and I will ask the city planner about what the cost of a CUP was, that application. Did that get discussed at all? Have you looked at that?
No, and I'll be honest, I don't remember this gentleman's name. Remind me. Mike? So we came to Mike last year at this time when we didn't realize that we were going to be over our lot coverage. And we'd originally built the home to have a basement, and so our footprint was actually going to be a little bit smaller on the lot coverage. And we went in and realized the water table was kind of high, and so we had so that lot coverage came in a little bit bigger. So when we came and chatted with Mike, he said, "Hey, there's not a conditional use permit on the process, but if you'll be patient with us and work through that process with us," we kind of felt a little bit like maybe some other folks on Washington did that went through this process. And this isn't meant to be bad, but we're almost like guinea pigs. Like we were going through this process with them and learning how this process worked. I came to the meeting in October where they talked about putting that conditional use permit process on the books. And so there was never any cost associated with us that we had that discussion for. I think we've all just been patient with each other as we've kind of learned that process and what it entails. And if there's any additional costs involved, I'm happy to pay my fair share. I don't have any problem with that, but no one's discussed it with me.
I don't doubt it. I think, I don't doubt your intentions are good. I don't doubt that you all discussed it. I'll be curious when I speak to the planner to hear what was going on there. But thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Other questions? Okay. Ms. Besaw?
Okay.
You want me to unplug it?
No, because we might go back to it, but thank you. Morgan Besaw, planning staff. The application in front of you this evening is for a conditional use permit. Oops, here we go. Mr. Borg is requesting a conditional use permit to waive the 15% lot coverage requirement for the RE zone to permit the construction of a 5,400 square foot detached garage building, bringing the total lot coverage up to 16.3%. Here is a vicinity map. The property is on the north side of Washam Road, just off of Ballantyne. You can see that's a little bit north of Floating Feather. In the RE zone, which is what this property is zoned, the minimum lot size is 1.8 acres. The applicant has 1.9. The maximum lot coverage of the RE zone is 15%. The applicant's requesting 16.3%. Parking spaces for residential would be 2 parking spaces, including 1 uncovered. You could see the garage and what was proposed. I just ballparked 10 plus. I mean, they're meeting and exceeding parking requirements. Front setback, code requires 50 feet. The applicant's proposing more than 100 feet. They're well to the rear of the primary structure. Rear setback for the zone is 30 feet. They're proposing 30 feet. 20 feet for the side, they're proposing 20, so they're just getting it up into the corner as far as possible. Maximum height for an accessory structure in the RE zone is 30 feet, and they're proposing 23.6, so they are within that. The existing home that they showed you is roughly 6,600 square feet of gross floor area. So we're not talking like total square footage, it's like the footprint on the ground. Existing attached garage is almost 1,500 square feet, and the proposed accessory structure garage is 5,400 square feet, bringing the total gross floor area to 13,521 square feet. Here is a photo. I think that based on the photos in your presentation, this photo is old, but it was from the county assessor site. This is the residence in front. You can see that on the site plan, that's sort of these two structures. The driveway, I think, in this site plan goes through it. So this is the house structure here, and then the building site up in the northwest corner. So here are some elevations submitted of the structure. The top picture looks like example siding. It has a single pitch, whereas the structure they're proposing is double pitch. The top picture has some clear story windows, which they're not proposing. It has some more glazing than they're proposing. Two of their elevations look like it would be solid steel siding, and then the two other faces have a little bit of glazing indoors. So, and I believe that the picture on top is a half to a third of the size of the 5,400 square feet, I believe, when I talked to Mr. Barber about it earlier. So I wouldn't necessarily say that this is an example of what this is going to look like, because it has, double pitch, way less glazing, and it's 3 times as big. But example siding. So here's just a blurb from the code talking about the lot area requirements for RE zone, which, as I mentioned before, 15%. 835, unique land uses. Accessory structures, the exterior design of the accessory structure will be compatible with the principal residence of the lot and shall not detract from the single family appearance of the lot or obscure and confuse the front entrance of the principal structure. I don't think it'll confuse the front entrance. It is to the rear. So the question before you would be if this project as proposed is compatible with the primary residence. As the applicant was mentioning, there was this code process to allow a CU to waive sections of code within Title 8 and Title 9 is new. I think it went into effect January 1st of this year, I believe. So prior to that, when the applicant first came to us, we said, no, you can't exceed lot coverage, sort of period. But as they mentioned, we were going through this process of adopting new code, and the new code states that exceptions or waivers of standards within Title 8 or Title 9, other than use, may be permitted through the issuance of a CUP. And so the applicant, the property owner, did wait. So instead of pursuing, the smaller garage at that time, they waited for us to change the code, and then they are here. So they would be the first person using this code section in this way. We have had other applicants use this CU to waive other things, like sidewalk on a small street in a subdivision, but we haven't had anyone use it to waive lot coverage because it's only been here since January. So then I also took a clip out of the standards for a conditional use permit, that it be designed, constructed, operated, and maintained to be harmonious and appropriate in appearance with the existing or intended character of the general vicinity, and that such use will not change the essential character of the same area. So the applicant's property is 8,200 square feet in size. 15% allows 12,414 square feet of coverage. The existing residence and garage total 8,121 square feet. So they do have a remaining square foot available for development of just under 4,300 square feet. As the applicant mentioned and showed in their presentation, that they are proposing a 60 by 90 for 5,400 square feet. And they did show the two options. So I liked that image in their presentation, that what it would look like if it was 60 by 90 versus 60 by 70, which they could do. And that is all I have, so I'll stand for questions.
Questions?
Yes, if I may.
Commissioner Smith.
Okay, Ms. Morgan, I'm curious. I asked the question of the applicant, is there a cost associated with getting a CUP?
Yes, just the standard CU fee that everyone pays. I think it's $1,200.
$1,200.
Right, plus noticing. So I think in their case that was like approximately $250. So maybe $1,454.
Okay.
If I remember.
Okay. Can I also ask?
Yes.
Okay, you'll have a chance. Sorry.
Yes, Commissioner.
I missed it.
Can I also ask, have we granted any other exceptions to the 15% coverage rule?
Not on a case-by-case basis. When new subdivisions have come in, a subdivision as a whole, as part of the PUD process, we have approved lot coverage increases within those development. Those are typically because they are requesting smaller lot sizes, right? So we saw that in the one earlier tonight. They have an R2 designation, but they are requesting a smaller lot, something that'd be more like a, I don't know, R4, which allows the increased lot coverage. So we have, through the PUD process for full subdivisions, and typically it's associated with this reduction in lot size. So you're putting a higher lot coverage in to correspond to what the code would be if it was in the zone for smaller lots.
And finally, can I ask, where does the 15% requirement come from? And do we happen to know how it was determined or calculated to be the number that saying there was a maximum of 15%?
I don't know, and maybe Mike can speak to that, but I do know that I ran some numbers and I looked at, the next lot, the next zoning would be R1, so 1 acre lots. And they are allowed more coverage. I think it's 30%, 35%. So I ran the numbers and, to see what was 35% of a 37,000 square foot lot, which is the minimum lot size, and compared it to 15% of the 1.8. And they're very close. So maybe Mike can speak to it, but I'm assuming that, there was a certain amount of buildable area that the city at one point in time thought was reasonable, and they tried to base the lot coverages per zone so that everyone got some similar type of area to build on. If you have anything to add, you can, and if not, we can leave it at that.
I can follow up. Commissioner Gerber probably knows as much history as I do. Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission. Once again, Mike Williams, Planning and Zoning staff for the record. And Commissioner Gerber, there's only 2 people in this room who've been around as long as we have, and you've been around the longest. And to answer your question, Commissioner Smith, I believe the reason that they were held to 15% back then, in the same way with if you get in the agricultural, the AR zone is at 10%, and that was to make sure that we keep that open feeling throughout that area, because it's at that time it was a very rural area. So instead of covering everything with buildings and structures, it still allowed for that open feeling. Once you get into what Morgan mentioned with like an R1 zoning designation, you're now getting more into more urbanized residential, which allows for more lot coverage because that's where you have people live, still keeping that open style feel with only allowing them 35%. And then as you get into higher densities, you start getting into 40%. And then mixed use, you get up to 50. But to answer the question on the RE, that 15% is just to keep as much open as you can.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Williams. My recollection is that this may go all the way back to when the first real adjustment and development of a comprehensive plan took place in the late 80s. So, that called for, the open space concept, and that may have been even when that percentage was put in. So, no other questions? Okay, we will. Yeah, I've got this. We'll open it up then to the public hearing, and let's see, we've heard from Mr. Barber, and we've heard from Mr. Borg, and Ron Stone indicated you wanted to testify, is that right? Yeah, come on up. Okay, get this right up here. And your name and address, please.
Ron Stone, 1495 Washam. I have 2 segments of property directly across the street from this development. And a little bit of history. I've lived in Eagle since 1979. I lived in Meridian prior to that, and so I've had a good deal of insight as far as development is concerned in Eagle. As I watched this development that we're talking about tonight, I was impressed with the size and the beauty of it. And this is good because I'm right across the street. I've been a teacher in the Meridian School District for 34 years. I've seen a lot of people come and go. And I have to admit, with some of the things I've seen, I have to agree with Mark Twain on common sense. You know, isn't so common anymore. And I have across the street 2 buildings. I used to be a shop teacher and a counselor, and I never lost the flair to have a building that I can enjoy my time in. The buildings I have, they're now on one of the properties across the street. They are, one of the buildings is 62.5 feet by 30, and a second story on that. And then I have another building, just for a little lightheartedness here. My wife, I married her in 2003, and she asked me how come I couldn't park a car in my garage when I had that big shop out there. And so I came home 2 days later, and she'd moved everything in my garage into the shop. And so I had a lot of trepidation about the fact of even getting married. So, but I had to make the choice, and I did choose my wife. But it was with the understanding that I could build another shop, and that was 54 feet by 42 feet. So both of those are on the property directly across the street. And as Jared said, there's another shop right next to it that's the same size again. So it's not a virgin territory as far as large shops. I think we need to use a little bit of common sense here, just like they were mentioning, and the fact that would we rather see the trailers parked along the side of the road, or would we like to have a beautiful landscape and the trailers undercover, whatever. But I think we need to use some common sense on this. It's a win-win. And so I recommend very highly that you accept the variance on this, that they are allowed to make the coverage.
Okay,
Thank you.
Any questions for Mr. Stone?
Thank you, Mr. Stowe.
Thank you. No,
No.
we're in good shape. Thank you. Anyone else want to testify? Okay. Who's coming up, Mr. Barber, Mr. Borg, both of you?
Kurt Barber, 2437 East Chalice Meridian. I just wanted to say because it was brought up twice about the cost. Jared doesn't know anything about the cost, so to speak, because I've been the one doing it all. So he will know, but he doesn't know yet. But what Morgan said is kind of what we expected. So that we knew that there was going to be cost involved, but he doesn't know about it really. That's why what he said, I think, on that. So, and then the other thing was on the building itself, the one Morgan put up that had the picture of the corner of it, and then the rest of the renderings, that was my engineer's elevations. So I just want to make sure that building looks nothing like those elevations of that, because that's just the engineer's, there was a lot more along with it. It doesn't look anything like that. The metal with the soffits around it and the horizontal metal versus vertical and the combination of glass. I've built 1,000 buildings over the course of 25 years, residential, commercial, and I will say that this building is going to be, if not the nicest, it's going to be in the top 3 of anything we've ever done. It's going to be extremely nice. So that corner you see is very accurate in what it's going to look like. It's just going to be a little bit bigger. I just wanted to clarify those two things.
Thank you. Mr. Borg, anything else?
Maybe the only thing I would add is, Washam's a dead-end road. It's pretty quiet. And really, we do tuck up pretty close to Crenabella, which does have, much higher lot coverage. And so it doesn't feel like it's out of place to me at all. It feels like it fits in just nice.
Okay, other questions?
I just had one, Mr. Chairman. So, Mr. Barber, so the design of the building will pretty much match the house or be similar, or have any
I would not say that.
sync?
I mean, you have a picture of the house from the front?
So the home's like, it's white and modern, and we're trying to stick with like a modern look on on this shop. So the shop has all these, it's going to have a corner like this with steel that's black, and the house has a lot of black on it.
Okay.
And then we try to match these black storefront windows with all these black windows on the house. And so my wife wanted a white house and I wanted a gray shop. So I'd like it to stay that way if possible, but we're trying to make it.
I was just curious.
Yeah. So it's not going to look like my house, but we're trying to share some of those design cues.
Thank you.
Other questions? You going to put grass in where you don't have houses and storage?
Oh man, I just went and bought 70 trees last week that are getting delivered. And I would have bought more, but the landscaper for Legacy came in and bought 600 trees the day before me from that spot. So we love it down there. We're going to build a nice place, and we're going to plant lots of trees, and it'll be landscaped real nice.
Great. Okay, I'm just thinking there's less area that you're going to have to mow if it was going to be grass.
Yeah, there'll be some concrete and a sport court and a pool, and my kids will probably be the beneficiaries of a smaller lawn.
Okay.
So
Lucky.
Okay,
Lucky
great.
kids.
We'll close public hearing at this point and open it up for a discussion by the council, or commission.
Mr.
I'd like to
Chairman.
open if I may.
Go ahead.
It was important for me to know the cost of the CUP in order to gauge the fact that if you wanted 20 feet more on the property than is permitted at the moment, to get an idea of what that financial impact would be. And I was quite surprised to hear how high it was, given that it's only a 20-foot difference. Now, the reason I asked about how the 15% was achieved and what was going on is, I get the impression that it was somewhat arbitrary in the sense of 15%, why not 16%, why not 14%? I don't know that it came by as a result of a calculation. And if what you said, Mr. Gerber, is correct, it reminds you something of the 80s, which was a long time ago when I was young. That it's a matter that it troubles me that it becomes such a hard and fast rule when probably there is no logical reason for it to be 15%. Now, although I personally have sympathy with the applicant here, I don't want it to be one of those things, well, it's only 1.3% or it's only 20 feet. I wish there was, I'm hoping that there's a way that this waiver could be approved that could withstand a logical rebuttal. And it's my sense that if you were living in this particular area and you see a shop that's built at 60 by 90 feet versus a 60 by 70 foot with somebody's RV stored on the one side that's internal to the property, I just don't see that most people would notice or care. And the thing is that I'm wondering, why would we not permit such a waiver that is reasonable? And you know, the other thing too, excuse me for coughing here, I'm left wondering, on a case-by-case basis, do we fall into the trap of creating a precedent by saying, well, okay, 16.3 is okay. What happens if somebody else comes up with, why not 18, et cetera, et cetera? So my thoughts would be to recommend for approval, but I want to make certain that it's not precedent setting or something that we regret doing a few years from now.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Well, I understand what you're saying, Commissioner Smith. I think with the site that's 1.9 acres to the 20 feet, is not a huge amount on such a large property. That's why you have to take it on a case-by-case basis. With that in mind, I'm going to make a motion to recommend for approval CU-05-22, waiver of lot coverage, Jared Borg.
There's second.
Second.
Okay. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Oh, wait, Mike has something.
Oh, yes. Mike? Or Mr. Williams?
Mr. Chair, Commissioner McLaughlin, you know where I'm going, right?
Yes.
Thank you.
I don't say recommend for approval.
No, you said recommend for approval with the staff recommended site-specific conditions and standard conditions. Thanks.
I always forget that. I always think it's just implied. I will restate my motion. I recommend for approval CU-05-22, waiver of lot coverage, Jared Borg, with site-specific conditions of approval as staff has recommended.
Still second.
Okay. All those in favor say aye.
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 Aye. Motion carries. Okay.
May I say you have a beautiful house?
Yeah.
And if you're going to add another note, I'm jealous of your workshop.
We'll have a big party. You're all invited.
Okay. New business, we have none. Reports, the commission.
I just have a brief comment, if I may. First of all, I want to thank you, Victor, for your lecture the other day, your presentation. It was very interesting and refreshing, and to hear some new things that are there. The other comment I have, and I hesitate to make it because I haven't talked to Victor about it, but it's a simple one, really. ACHD has the responsibility of reviewing all of the applications that come before them. And the only time they don't make recommendations is when they choose not to, because it's not under their directive or they're in their bailiwick. The one thing, though, I cannot recall ever seeing ACHD actually reject something because of high traffic volumes. And I just wonder at times if the view of ACHD sometimes becomes very segmented, meaning that it's as if that organization looks at a jigsaw piece and they evaluate it, but I don't know, I've never seen evidence of the how does that jigsaw piece relate to maybe the surrounding 20 pieces? And it seems that we go forward, and it's the eternal complaint and concern of citizens of Eagle with the high volumes of traffic. And we always default to ACHD or ITD, review this, and they have their experts and what have you. But it always seems to be yes, with some conditions, but in the end, it means that our infrastructure is always trailing significantly the growth rate in this particular valley. And there's not a single person here, I believe, that will not say growth is inevitable. This is the very thing attracted me to this place, attracts many others, and what have you. And yet we keep continuing. I smile at some of the road speed limits, for example. We have a 3-lane road on State Street where you're compelled to travel at 20 miles per hour. And then you transition to 25. And then the thing is that there are other 2-lane roads where 55 is permitted. And so I just wonder sometimes who is capable, who has the skills to look at the big picture in terms of the overall impact. So that's just what I wanted to say.
I have a kind of a follow-up for Victor. If we turn down a subdivision based on the fact that it's going to increase traffic, and we ended up going, and we got sued by the people who wanted to put the subdivision in, what is the likelihood that ACHD would have enough of a position to say, or the people who are suing us would have enough of a position to be able to say, hey, look, ACHD is the one responsible for the traffic. They said this thing's okay. City of Eagle says, no, it's not okay because we think the traffic's too bad. Are we basically in a situation where we really wouldn't have much of a defense based on the fact that ACHD is responsible and we're maybe responding to the desire of the community, but not to what responsibilities are there?
And members of the commission, it's a great question. It's a question I think that's asked by not just planning and zoning commissions, but as well as city council members and county commissioners, wherever you're in an area with a lot of growth. The best that I can give is, in terms of an answer, is going to be...
It depends.
Nope.
No.
Well, and yes and no. It depends basically on, you're sitting there as a quasi-judicial tribunal. If you remember the training that I did, was it just last week or the week before that? But you guys, as well as the city council, sit in a quasi-judicial role, right? So you are listening to the testimony, you're listening to the evidence that's before you and reaching a decision, yet none of you are part of the judicial branch, which is why it's called quasi-judicial. So your decisions have to be guided not just by your personal experiences, by testimony, but also by what is the evidence in the record. Really hard when you have the road authority giving you information that says, yes, we still have capacity. How can you actually say, well, I disagree with that when it's in the record? And that's where, this is it depends. If someone appeals it to a court, was there evidence to support your decision? And there could also be individuals that say, well, we don't, we think there's a lot of traffic. Ultimately, as the finder of fact, you folks sitting up there, your job is to listen to everything and come to a reasoned conclusion. And that's what the court will be measuring, which is why it's not black and white. It's going to fall on, ultimately, if it went to a lawsuit, a person sitting in a black robe having to make a decision whether or not you made a reasoned decision or not. So there's no, bright line rule on this.
Thank
so
you.
best I can give, sorry.
Great. Thank you. Anything else from the commission? No. Okay. Anything else from the city attorney?
Nothing, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Victor. Anything from the city staff? Thank you, Mr. Williams. That'll be,
Mike, I got something.
And Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, your next meeting will have Soaring Feather and Kingswood subdivisions. And they're in close proximity to the one you just heard.
okay. Thank you very much.
Let's see, what's the date of that next meeting? That'll be what, the?
June the
6th?
6th.
June the 5th. I will probably not be here. I'll be on the road at that time.
I will be here.
Okay. So we got two for sure gone.
I'm here.
I'm here as far as I know, so we better make sure the real chairman's going to be here.
Mr. Chairman, members of the commission, you'll notice that their packets will be a little bit different here on out. The city has changed software that is going to be putting together agendas and packets for the commissions and council. They'll be prepared just a little bit differently. You'll notice that they'll have the cover sheets and then the application following behind it. So just wanted to let you guys know that that's how packets will be.
Can we still do them as separate pieces, though? I mean, I got this thing, and then I had to fish all through to be able to find the second item. It was a lot easier to have two of them separated for me.
Yes,
And
I already talked
I would
to
second
Matt.
that. But also, Matthew, if I may, you know, I can foresee a 500-page combination very easily, and it'll either be stapled into 2 or 3 different sections depending on your 6-foot staples. And then it becomes incredibly difficult to pull them apart and then manage them. So I think something has to be looked at in terms of ease of handling.
And Mr. Williams is correct. The future for this software is that there will be no paper moving forward. Eventually, there will be iPads that will sit up on the dais that will be able to be accessed by you guys both at home and in here in chambers. So the process for review will come digitally.
Okay.
That's the idea. We're not quite there yet, and the city's not quite there yet, but that's the direction that the city's moving in.
Mr. Chair, if I may add a comment. I think that's just fine if it's available at home while you're going through all of that. If we could have a searchable packet, whoa, I've only been thinking about that for 100 years.
And
that would be fabulous. And also one last thing is the ability to be able to make notations like you can in Word, for example.
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Smith, the new software, iLegislate is its name, will have the ability for each commissioner and council member to have their own login with their own note-taking system that will be specific to the login of each commissioner and member of the council. And it will be searchable, so no longer will we have to scan things onto the system and then upload them. It will just be a digital searchable document of record.
Well, my last comment on that is that would be a fair exchange if we get those things. I mean, I really do like the hard copy, but if those things were in place at the digital level, that would be a great exchange.
Until we reach that point, I can definitely tabulate each different item so that they're easily locatable in your guys' paper packets.
Anything else with staff? Okay. Would accept a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
We are adjourned.
Thank you.
Thanks for your process. Well, not totally done.